This is Gadgets Top 321. In today's video, I'm going to be taking a look at three of my favorite fountain pens. I've got the Pilot Custom 74, the Sailor Pro Gear Slim, and the Platinum 3776. Now these pens may look different, but they have a lot in common. They are all, I'm 99% sure these are all injection molded plastic. They're all cartridge converter pens. They all have 14 karat gold nibs. The ones I have all have a fine nib. And they all have, if you buy them from a U.S. retailer, they all have similar price points. They're all in that $150 to $160 range. Now, if you purchase these directly from Japan, you'll be able to get them for less than that, but again, they will all still be in a similar price range. The first one I'm going to take a look at is the Pilot Custom 74. The model that's available in the United States is the Demonstrator. Now you can get it in a variety of colors, but they all have this smoky colored top and bottom, no matter which color Demonstrator you get. It's a nice size pen when unposted. The pen fits me really well. It's got a number 5 size nib. That's a smaller nib. The grip section, some people describe it as being kind of on the small side, but I have small hands, so it just fits me perfectly. The threads are very shallow, and you know, if your hands happen to fall on the threads, they're not uncomfortable at all. This is, like I mentioned, a cartridge converter pen. Now, one difference between these pens, they're all cartridge converter, but each of these, Pilot, Sailor, and Platinum, all have their own proprietary cartridges and converters. The Pilot is able to fit the Con 70 converter, which is the larger one. That's a good point about this pen. It's able to hold a lot of ink. Now it can also hold the smaller converters, but this converter adds just enough weight to this pen that it's just balanced very nicely. It posts, but it doesn't post very deeply, but it posts with a soft click. Okay? It makes it a long pen, but it's still, the balance on it is pretty good. It's a little bit back heavy, but it's still, you know, it's not tremendously back heavy. So it's comfortable to use even when posted, even though it may look, you know, a little long. Let's see, and I was going to show how many rotations it takes to uncap. All of these, all three pens have threaded caps. So there's one rotation. So 1.5 rotations to uncap. There's a cap liner, which is also this smoky color, smoky translucent color. Sometimes that's a downside with pens, but since the grip section is smoky and the two ends are smoky, it kind of fits in with the color scheme. Now you can get opaque versions of this pen, but they're only available in Japan. Now, the Sailor Pro Gear Slim is a pen I've been wanting for a long time. I just recently was able to pick one up. You notice it's quite a bit smaller than the other two pens. This is the Pro Gear Slim. You can get a Pro Gear, which is a little bit longer, and I think it's a little bit girthier than this pen if you're wanting something a little bit bigger. Now the Pro Gear models have flat ends. If you're not a fan of the flat ends, but you still like this style of pen, the Sailor 1911 has rounded ends. And I believe the 1911 comes in a slim and a full-size version as well, so that gives you some options. Now, I have the opaque white version. The reason I picked this one up is because, the reason I got the white is because it was the least expensive one I was able to find. It's got rhodium trim, I like that, or rhodium plated trim. And, but you can also get the Pro Gear in translucent models. Now, the translucent models tend to be the limited editions. They're only available for a short time, and so they tend to run a little bit more, but you do have that option. Let me see how many rotations it takes. So this one takes 1 3/4 rotations. Now this model has a black section. It's also kind of a smaller section. The threads are a little more pronounced, but they're not uncomfortable at all. This is a very comfortable section. And it's also a number 5 nib. Now, I mentioned that all 3 of these pens have their own proprietary converters and cartridges that they use. All 3 of these companies also make their own nibs, so even though these nibs are the same size, I'm pretty sure they're not interchangeable with, like this number 5's not interchangeable with the Pilot number 5. But it's an attractive, it looks similar, it's a similar design, the Sailor and the Pilot. They both have very pretty scroll work. Let me see if I can get the camera to focus. There we go. Both are very pretty. Now, let's see. Let me get the lid back on the Pilot. The Pro Gear Slim is pretty short when it's not posted. For me, it's still usable, but I've got pretty small hands, so for a lot of people it may not be. Now, there's not a click when posting on this one, but it does post securely just by friction, and it makes a nice size pen. It's not back weighted, not back heavy at all. The weight is just right here in the crook of your hand, and it's very comfortable to use. Let's see, I'll show you the converter on this one. Sailor has their own converters. Now, Pilot has several different converters. They have smaller ones and like the larger Con 70. I forget what the smaller one is. Con 50, Con 40. And then there's a squeeze converter. For Sailor, all that I'm aware of is this, Sailor converter. And that's what it looks like. And it's a twist. It's a piston converter. Whereas this one was a pump. Now the smaller converter that you can get, Pilot converter, it's a twist piston converter. Now this has a cap liner, and I'm pretty sure you can see in there, that appears to have a cap liner, and you can kind of feel it like when you're screwing the cap back on, you reach a point where you start feeling some resistance, and then you turn it just a smidge more. I think it's engaging that cap liner, and that should keep your ink from drying out. And Platinum actually advertises their cap liner. They advertise that it's called a slip and seal cap liner that is actually spring-loaded back here, and they advertise that it will keep your pen from drying out for a year or two. So now I've got the opaque black with gold trim, and again, same as with the Pro Gear, slim. I just looked for the cheapest or the least expensive one I could find, and it happened to be this black one. I liked the looks of it. So, but originally the 3776 that caught my eye and got me thinking about getting one was a couple of years ago. They came out with a pink demonstrator model, and it had gold trim. It was a pale pink with gold trim. Oh, it was so pretty. But it was like between $200 and $220, and you can still find them around. Then a year after that, they came out with a pale purple lavender demonstrator model that had rose gold, and it was again between $200 $220. And I really seriously thought about getting one, but I thought, is that worth the print? Is just having a pink pen worth, or a purple pen worth the premium that you have to pay? It's the same pen as this. It's just a demonstrator, and it's got different colored hardware. This still has the gold nib, and let's see how many rotations it takes. So, and I like the looks of this. It's got that Mont Blanc kind of vibe to it, even though I've never had a desire to get a Mont Blanc. When this came in, I was like, ooh, this looks fancy. Let's see, okay, 1.5 rotations. Now this, the 3776, has a more unique looking nib. Let me get it to focus. Maybe. The nib is a little bit flatter. It's wider, a little bit larger. It's a pretty nib. It's not as ornate. There's not as much scroll work, but it's got a heart-shaped breather hole. It's a pretty nib. It says 3776. It's 14 karat. It's larger than the number 5 nib. Let's see while I have it unposted. Okay, there you go. It's a little bit larger than the Pro Gear Slim. Maybe a hair shorter. I don't know. Around the size of the Custom 74. Now this one posts a little bit deeper than the Custom 74. It doesn't snap on. It just holds on there by friction, but it holds very securely. And it feels kind of like the 74. It's a little bit back weighted, but the pen is so light that it's not uncomfortable. Most of the weight is right here, but it doesn't look as disproportionately long. So it's a nice looking pen. Let me compare it, let you see what the nib sizes, how they compare. So see, it's a little bit larger. And that gives you a different feel when you're writing. You're farther away from the paper when you have a larger nib. It's pretty comfortable. The section, again, is not a large section, but it's comfortable. I like the shape of it. Now there's a noticeable step on this one. But, when you're looking at pictures on the internet, it's hard to judge whether this would be uncomfortable or not. That was always something I was concerned about, but it's not uncomfortable at all. Very nice pen in the hand. Okay, let's take a look at how these write. And again, you reach a point when you're putting the cap on that you start feeling some resistance, and you turn just a little bit more. You can feel that slip and seal cap liner engaging. Okay, let's see how these write. Let's see. Been testing my pencils over here. Let's see. Gotta get my glasses on. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. Now I will tell you, the writing experience with these three, this is where these three are very different. each have their own distinct feel. I'm going to start with the 3776. Okay. This is fine nib. Now, if you've watched any other reviews of the Platinum, there is definitely some feedback. If you like a glassy, smooth nib, especially on this fine, I'm not sure how a broad nib would feel, but there's definitely some feedback. It's not scratchy, but there is significant, sorry about that, there's significant feedback. And the nib feels very stiff to me. There's no give in the nib. I'm not one who tries to get line variation. I'm not into flexing the nib or anything like that. I use my pens for note taking. But that nib feels very stiff. Here's the Pro Gear Slim. Oh, sorry about that. This is significantly smoother. I really like this pen. The nib, the stiffness feels about the same. There's no give in it at all. And the line that it puts down, look, it's hard to tell. You can't really tell a difference between the two. The line that it puts down, very similar, but where this one had significant feedback, this one is quite a bit smoother. You can really feel the difference, but they're both very rigid nibs. And finally, the Custom 74. Now, this is a significantly different writing experience. It doesn't look any different, but this is very smooth, and you wouldn't notice it unless you've used a rigid, like you can't feel that it's bouncing. It doesn't feel flexy or anything. But if you use a rigid nib and then use one like this on the Pilot Custom 74, there's some bounce to this. There's some give, and it's just a very comfortable writing experience. Let's see, let's compare the wetness between them. I'll go ahead and do this one. Okay. And now the Sailor. The Sailor is quite a bit drier, and I'll point something out in just a minute. Okay, and this is what this demonstration here matches what I've experienced in using these pens. They look like they're writing the same, but the Platinum does write a little bit wetter, followed by the Custom 74, and out of the three, the Sailor writes a little bit drier. Let me show you something. I don't know if it's noticeable. I guess I can show you in this writing sample. Let me zoom out and then hold it up here and focus in. with, it's not as noticeable here. Let me get my writing sample that I did earlier for myself. Notice on the Custom 74 how the tops of the letters, the ink is a little bit lighter than in the bottom. Look here. On the bottom of these loops, the ink is darker, and the bottom of the letters, it's a little bit darker. That's on the Pilot. On the Platinum, all the strokes, the ink looks uniform. And then on the Sailor, again, the ink appears darker on the bottoms of the letters and the strokes. It's not super noticeable. I can see it a little bit more. Maybe here you can see it. I can see it a little bit more in real life. It's not showing up as much here on